Hi, I'm Dr. Paul Haar, the Associate Professor of Saxophone and Director of Jazz Studies in the Glencorf School of Music at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. You know, in my life, I've been very fortunate to perform with some amazing musicians on some of the world's finest stages. And where I'm comfortable playing for audiences now, it wasn't always the case. In fact, I used to suffer from performance anxiety in a pretty bad way. Now, before we go any further, this video isn't designed to be the definitive method of how to deal with stage fright. You know, the butterflies, the cold sweats, the dry mouth, the things that you experience whether you're playing a classical recital or you're in a jazz band or you're just coming down from the practice rooms to have a lesson. Rather, this is a discussion of the issues that I faced, things that I've discovered, and some tips that I've given my students over the years that seem to have helped them. I hope, if anything, this starts a thinking process on ways that you can deal with your performance anxiety. Years ago, when I was teaching at the University of Tennessee, I received a tremendous honor. The director of bands came up to me and said, "Paul, how would you like to do a featured solo with the Pride of the Southland Marching Band?" Well, I'm a big college football fan. For those of you who may not be familiar with Tennessee or the Tennessee Volunteers, they play in one of the largest stadiums in college football. Neyland Stadium will commonly hold over 100,000 people on any given Saturday, all diehard fans cheering on their Tennessee Volunteers. So having an opportunity to solo with a great marching band in a place that could hold over 100,000 people, perfect setting for performance anxiety, right? Wrong. My blood pressure didn't change a beat. Cool as a cucumber, had no issues. It was a couple days later when I was in my saxophone studio masterclass, teaching a student about the second movement of the Creston Sonata. I dang near had a panic attack. So explain to me why playing an improvised solo in front of 107,000 people doesn't incite performance anxiety, but playing for a group of students who have all come to the university to study with me on a piece that I've performed hundreds of times would cause me to nearly pass out. Well, one of the things I learned is that performance anxiety is selective, and for many of you, this is the case. In my instance, in my situation, I've been playing jazz music since I was 13. I've been playing with big bands professionally since I was 13. Because of the nature of the music, casual gigs, cocktail parties, jam sessions, I'm playing and improvising all the time. Classical music is a little different. I jokingly refer to doing a classical recital is like preparing for a wedding. You prepare for 9 months, every detail down to the last second, and you practice everything, and then it's over in an hour. So the frequency for me of performing classical music was much lower than jazz music. Thus, it was the source of my performance anxiety. So the first thing that I would recommend is, can you pinpoint what it is that causes your anxiety? Is there a particular situation? Is there a particular person? For example, do you get nervous whenever a certain member of your studio or your parents come to visit you, or if your teacher's in the room? Little things that we can do to identify our source of anxiety can then be the cure for dealing with it. I've come to find that performance anxiety stems from two major areas. One, the preparation, which also leads to the performance portion. And two, this performance in a self-esteem based thought process. So it doesn't matter whether we're talking about a weekly lesson or a jazz gig or a DMA doctoral recital. There's 3 stages we're going to talk about. First, the before, the preparation phase. There are things that we can do in the preparation phase that will greatly diminish our anxiety levels. 2, the during, the performance time. What can we do in the midst of performing to improve our stress levels? And 3, the after. That's the post-mortem discussion of what went right, what went wrong. Let's listen to the recording. There's an old saying, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. But for a lot of players, I don't think they understand what the purpose of practicing is. I have a student who's a chemistry major here at the University of Nebraska, And she's also a fine saxophonist, and we were talking about saxophone and practicing and what she does in the chemistry world. And I asked her a very simple question. I said, "What's it like to be in the laboratory? What's lab time like?" And she said, "Oh, wow, that's the best time." She says, "That's the discovery phase. That's where we try things, and that's where we tweak things and we discover, and sometimes things work, sometimes they don't." And I said, "Well, do you get really down when you discover that your formula doesn't work?" She says, "No." She says, "In fact, it gives us greater clarity on what we can work on." And I said, "Well, I think it would be really difficult to work really hard on this formula and then take it into the lab and to work with it, only to find out it didn't give you the result that it was intended to give." And she said, "Well, Dr. Har, those are monikers that are placed on it after." She says, "The laboratory time is simply what it is. Your theorem or your theory worked or it didn't. If it didn't work, how bad didn't it work? What variables can we change?" She says, "This is the time where we create. This is where we discover. This is where we question." And that got me thinking, how often do we not think that way in our practice rooms? How many times do you walk in and go, "Oh, I have to practice. I have to do this. Oh, I've got a lesson coming up in 5 days, and this is a really difficult etude that he's given me." Or, "I've got to do this. I've got 4 months until this recital, and I don't have a lot of time, and I'm taking difficult classes." Or, "I can't do this technical thing." We place a lot of anxiety on ourselves because we don't deal with the issue. For example, if we're practicing a scale, a G major scale, and it's not even, it simply is not even. It isn't a good unevenness or a bad unevenness. That's something that we place upon it later. The practice room should be where we try to play too loud, we try to play too soft, we over-articulate, we under-articulate, we wait, we rush, we add vibrato, we use no vibrato, we record ourselves, we discover what the music making process is. We simply judge it for what it is. If I add more vibrato to this passage, what does it sound like? Well, I don't think I want that in that passage. Okay, then you now know. It's not something that we have to place at the forefront of our existence.